Hey, what's up? Jeff Ratcliffe here. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers passing game was one of the more explosive in the league last year, and they have the potential to be even better this year with Bruce Arians now at the helm at head coach. So what sort of fantasy production should we be looking for? Let's preview the 2019 Tampa Bay Buccaneers for fantasy football purposes. And I think we got to start at the quarterback position. Jameis Winston, I know it feels like every year we're talking about this guy as a breakout candidate. I swear this year is the year he's going to break out, though. And you know, we kind of saw it last year. So last year was an interesting year with Jameis Winston. He started the season suspended. We saw Fitzpatrick explode out of the gate, and then he loses the job to Jameis, who loses the job to Fitzpatrick, who loses the job to Jameis. And then eventually Jameis was fine. You know, down the stretch from week 11 on, he was the number 9 fantasy quarterback. So not too shabby there. He was back-end quarterback 1 production. You know, when you look at it, one of the things I love about Jameis is he really takes a lot of shots to the end zone. On a per-game basis last year, he threw 2.7 end zone throws per game. End zone throws are important because you have your highest percentage conversion rate, converting those to touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes had 2.9, so Jameis wasn't that far off of what Patrick Mahomes was putting up last year in terms of shots to the end zone. He takes a lot of those shots to the end zone, so that bodes well. Plus the fact that Arians is there, this should help Jameis. We've seen Arians work with quarterbacks, you know, with similar skill sets to Jameis Winston in the past. Bigger body guys, maybe, you know, not the most mobile quarterbacks, but guys who, you know, have a big arm. Carson Palmer, we saw success with Bruce Arians and Carson Palmer. Remember that 2015 season? Palmer put up some major fantasy numbers. Of course, Arians got to work with Ben Roethlisberger. And you know, a lot of folks even comped Jameis from a skill set to Ben Roethlisberger when he was coming into the league. So I think this bodes positively for Jameis Winston. We're not drafting Jameis as a top 12 option, very likely. I don't expect him to come off the board that early, but he's right after that. And what's nice is you're not drafting him super early, but you get major upside with Jameis Winston. So this is the year we should see that Jameis Winston breakout. And of course, a big part of this is just the fleet of receivers he has at his disposal. You start with Mike Evans. This guy is phenomenal. And I know that some fantasy players out there love to, you might even be one of them, you love to hate Mike Evans because of 2 years ago or whatever, and he screwed your fantasy team over. You know what? Forget about it, because he's been nothing short of awesome throughout his career. 5 seasons in the NFL, 5,000-yard seasons. Every single year he's topped 1,000 yards. Even in that year when he screwed your team over, he topped 1,000 yards. 1,500 yards last year. And what I love about him, you know, those end zone shots that I was talking about with Jameis, well, 16 end zone targets for Mike Evans this year. If we see that sort of volume continue, expect that touchdown productivity to creep up. Mike Evans could be, you know, he could finish the season as an elite option. He certainly has that in his range of expectations. I'm viewing Mike Evans, though, as a rock-solid wide receiver 1 option. Have him currently ranked 8th at the position. Now, we also have Chris Godwin here, and Chris Godwin last year finished, you know, it was a little mini breakout. He finished as the number 28 receiver in PPR, which is saying something because he was the number 4 receiver on his team. You know, you had Deshaun Jackson ahead of Chris Godwin. You had Adam Humphries ahead of him, and obviously Mike Evans was ahead of him. Chris Godwin, to do that as the number 4 is almost unheard of, and a big part of it was that red zone usage. Last year, Chris Godwin in the end zone, he saw 14 end zone targets. He was among the league leaders, but as the number 4 receiver on his team. Obviously, fast forward to this year, no Deshaun, no Humphries. Godwin is solidified as that number 2. He's in a prime position to really break out in a big way this year. Now, I wouldn't say top 10 or anything like that. It's still Mike Evans' show, but could we see Godwin get 75 to 80 catches? Could we see him threaten double-digit touchdowns? All of that within the realm of possibility this year. Godwin is a hot fantasy commodity. You're looking at him as a wide receiver 2, rock-solid wide receiver 2 option. Now, there really isn't another receiver. It's not a situation like last year where they're going to have 4 viable options on a week-in, week-out basis at wideout, but you do have O.J. Howard there. O.J. Howard last year, now he was dinged up for a good chunk of the season, but played in 10 games. He finished as a top 10 fantasy tight end 7 out of those 10 games. That's crazy consistency. It shows he has a nice high floor. He also has a big-time ceiling with his athleticism. The thing about O.J. Howard, though, now first and foremost, obviously he has to stay healthy for the season. But the thing about O.J. Howard, the concern that maybe you would have for fantasy purposes is Cameron Brate is still on this roster. And Cameron Brate is not a guy with, elite athleticism or anything like that, or number one tight end potential. But in the same right, he's a guy who's shown over the years that he can catch the football, and Jameis Winston likes him, and Jameis Winston's going to give him some targets. So that puts a little bit of a cap on O.J. Howard's overall upside. That being said, you have to view Howard easily as a top 10 option, and really I think you look at him as maybe the 5th or 6th or 7th tight end off the board, probably about 6th tight end off the board on draft day. Should put you around 5th or 6th round in your 12-team leagues. He's not a big three. Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle, they're going to be gone way before O.J. Howard, but you get some major upside with O.J. Howard as your tight end. Of course, though, the running back position, while they're loaded up with receiving talent, the running back position leaves a little bit to be desired. Peyton Barber is there, and last year Peyton Barber ranks 9th in the league in carries, finishes 31st in PPR scoring. That's actually hard to do with that sort of volume. In fantasy football, when it comes to running backs, volume is the name of the game. The more that you touch the ball, the more likely you are to score fantasy points. So for him to do this, that shows he's really just a guy. Don't really have much upside there at all for fantasy purposes, even if he earns the starting job. Not crazy about Peyton Barber, but Ronald Jones is there. Now, last year, Ronald Jones did a whole lot of nothing for us for fantasy purposes. Did a whole lot of nothing for football purposes as well. But there is upside with Ronald Jones. So think about that this year as you go through your fantasy drafts. Do you want to go with no upside with Peyton Barber? No. Do you want to go with the unknown who has upside with Ronald Jones, who hasn't done much for fantasy purposes, but at least has that high ceiling? Maybe. But we're not going to invest too much in him. Here's the thing. With Ronald Jones, he's an RB4. You're looking at him as like an 8th or 9th round pick. Not a guy you're going to prioritize, but at least you have that upside dart that you can throw in a potentially potent offense this year. I know you might be watching this video and saying, hey, what about Bruce Anderson, the rookie? Well, hey, I like Bruce Anderson a lot. The question is first, is he going to make the 53-man roster? And even if he does, is there opportunity there for him? I like him in dynasty leagues. He's a deep, deep, deep name to know in redraft, but when it really comes down to it, Ronald Jones, he's going to give you the most bang for your buck. He's not an uber exciting guy, though, so I wouldn't get too carried away. The value with the Buccaneers is totally in the passing game. Jameis poised to break out. Evans on the edge of elite territory. Godwin breakout. Howard breakout. Lots of value to be had there. If you want to see where all the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fall in our rankings, you can check those out and more over at ProFootballFocus.com.